Welcome back everyone to the channel. Today's video we're going to be talking about why the CLA 45 AMG 2020 is the perfect daily AMG. I've talked about a lot of these things in other videos, but I'm going to bring those all together today in a single video. We're going to go over the three topics on why this car is a perfect daily driver as an AMG, and that's comfort, fun factor, and cost. Those are the three things that we're going to be talking about today on what makes this car the perfect daily AMG. So I figured we would start with cost because that's probably the number one thing that people think about when they want a daily and AMG is how much it's going to cost. I had a C63s before the CLA 45. If you're new to this channel, the C63s did cost a lot of money to run as a daily driver, and I'm here to say thankfully this car is a lot cheaper to run as a daily driver. So I think one of the most expensive costs of the C63s was tires. Tires had to be replaced so often and they were not cheap, sometimes $350 per tire, because they did use the Michelin Pilot Super Sports, or I think they replaced it with a different model, but they are still equally expensive. So thankfully with this car you run the Michelin Pilot Super Sport 4S's, which are a fraction of the price of the Michelin Pilot Super Sports that I ran on my C63s. They were about, I think, 190 bucks on Tire Rack per tire. The Michelin Pilot Super Sports I think sometimes would be upwards of 350 to 400 bucks a tire, which is insane for summer tires, and especially because they needed to be replaced so often. How these tires are set up, like the toe in and things like that, they don't wear out as much, so you don't have to replace them as often, and they are cheaper tires, so you don't spend as much per tire when you have to replace them. So depending on what wheels you get, these are the AMG Y-spoke wheels that are on the higher end models of the AMG range. These are the 19s all around. They about 255 I think squared up, with a smaller rim size than you would have like on the C63s, which was 20 in the back, 19 in the front, and then it was 285 in the rear, 255 in the front. Can get the smaller wheels on this car. I'm not sure what size they are, but I do know they are probably cheaper than these tires. So the current tires on this setup are 245 19s all around because they are winter tires. The skinnier tire is a little bit better in winter, but on summer tires I do run 255 19s all around. Comparing to the C63s, this is much cheaper setup. One of the questions that I get asked a lot on my Instagram DMs is what is the MPG for this car? So it definitely depends on how you drive, but in reality, this car does a lot better in fuel consumption than basically any other AMG on the range, and that's because it has a 2-liter 4-cylinder. It's going to run a little bit better on fuel. So this is my chart right now as of 30 minutes. You see I can almost hit 40 mpg in some cases. I was driving from my home in the neighborhood around this area, and then once I got onto the highway, the 4 lanes, that's where I got about almost 40 mpg. On some trips where I've had 14-hour drives, I've gotten up to almost 60-80 on the highway. So this car does save a lot on fuel. The average right now on 30 minutes is 14.2, but that's because I had a short sprint and I was in Sport Plus. So depending on the modes that you drive will factor in how much MPG you get. If you drive in comfort most of the time and you're on the highway, you can get 40 to 60 to 80 miles to the gallon. So when you fill up, I think it's at about a 12-gallon tank. It's fairly small. You can get around, right now it's 65, you can get around 400 to 500 miles on a full tank, which is insane. But like I said, it depends heavily if you're in comfort or if you're in different modes. Like if you switch into Sport Plus, obviously you're gonna run not as good MPG as you would if you were, worrying about MPG. I think it's an important thing to note because in terms of cost, this does not run as much fuel as other AMGs, so you save a lot of money on yearly fuel costs having the smaller engine than you would if you had a big V8 like in the C63s. So another thing to consider when you're talking about costs as a daily AMG is maintenance. On the C63s, I had to get oil changes almost all the time because it was a daily driver. Those range from $200 to $400 depending on the oil change. But then that doesn't factor in the yearly service that needed to be done, which was very, very expensive when it comes to AMGs. I am thankful to say that this car is definitely a lot cheaper when it comes to maintenance. Because of the smaller engine, you don't really need to change the oil as much as you would on the V8. I know after break-in, I had my oil changed on the C63s. On this car, I didn't because it wasn't recommended in the manual, so it wasn't really needed. Oil changes aren't going to cost as much. I haven't had an oil change yet, but I will update you on my first oil change on how much it costs so you guys get an idea of what the costs are for an oil change on the CLA 45 AMG. But maintenance-wise, like like I said, doesn't cost as much as it would on a big boy AMG, which is great because when you have a daily, you don't really want to spend too much money on oil changes and maintenance. You want to basically save as much money as you can on a daily. But now if you have a sports car for the weekend, it doesn't really matter for maintenance because you're just having fun. Or if you have unlimited budget, get a C63S like I did. Don't worry about the cost and just daily that. This is for information on the CLA 45 AMG, whether or not it costs a lot to maintain, and I'm thankful to say that it really does not. Like I was saying, because it is a smaller engine, you save a lot on fuel costs, and you also save a lot on maintenance because it's an easier engine to work on, change the oil, not as bad as the C63S. The one thing I did want to note is I do have a cold air intake from Armaspeed, which you can buy on the link down below. This was, I think retail was close to $600 for the intake. On the C63S, a cold air intake is about $2,000 to $3,000 if you want a carbon one. Now, I know you're thinking, well, you have a C63S, you can afford a $2,000, $3,000 intake, and I would have to say, yes, that is probably true, but in terms of modding and other add-ons, this car is going to be a lot cheaper as a daily driver. If you wanted to get a cold air intake, or if you wanted to get a downpipe, or a tune, or a new exhaust, this car is obviously going to be a lot cheaper to do all those things than the C63S. Something to think about whether or not you want to mod your daily driver. It's important to think about cost wise in terms of parts and tuning and things like that. This car definitely a lot cheaper in terms of the modding department. So the other thing that's great about this car being a perfect daily driver is the 4 doors. And I've talked about this before. It's a lot easier to get your friends inside when you have 4 doors rather than the C63S trying to climb over the seats. It's a very comfortable car. You can fit people that are up to 6 feet tall. So if you do need to have a daily driver that can fit 4 people comfortably, this is perfect versus like the coupes. You really can't fit that many people in the back seat because it's so tight. So that's one thing that's great about the comfort on this car, is that you do have 4 doors so you can fit more people. The other thing that comes in terms of comfort, making this a perfect daily driver, is the interior. The interior is the newly updated MBUX system and also a new interior layout that they have on the A-Class, the CLA class, and other lineups in the Mercedes. But in terms of comfort, this car is a very cozy interior, especially for long drives. The seats, I've said in my dislike video, aren't as comfortable as they should be, but you can change that by getting the performance seats, which I highly recommend if you are buying this car. Get the performance seats because it'll be even better overall, because the interior right now is just amazing. It's very comforting, very cozy, especially with the new ambient lighting, which I've showed many times how it lights up at night. It looks so cool. And the one other thing that I haven't really talked about inside, so Mercedes actually put a soft rubber in the interior rather than the fake black plastic that usually what manufacturers do on cheaper end models like the CLA and the A-Class, but instead they put this soft touch rubber that looks good, feels nice, and it feels a lot better than the plastic that you find like right here. I'm glad that they didn't cover the interior completely in that, and it just makes it much more comfortable inside because it does feel much more premium than it would if it had that fake plastic that is on the door frame. Now they did outweigh that with the Alcantara here, so it doesn't look as bad, and then this like aluminum finish overall makes it look good, so you don't really notice as much plastic, and when the door's closed, it pretty much closes right here, so you don't see as much. But in terms of comfort, this interior is amazingly comfortable, and I don't know, it's one of my favorite parts about this car because when you're in a daily driver, you're sitting inside all the time. Now, if you were in like a sports car for the weekend, you could have a gutted out interior, it doesn't matter. But as a daily driver, you do want to have comfort, you do want to have the technology, and this car has it. The other thing about this car, and as you can tell by how dirty it is, and I apologize, I just never clean my car, you can drive this car through anything and it doesn't matter, and that's because it has 4MATIC Plus. So it is a front wheel drive bias all-wheel drive system, but overall this thing will keep you on the road through ice, snow, and rain, which is completely different than my C63S, which I drove through everything anyways. But on the highway, when there was big puddles of water, I was always terrified that the rear end would give out. But also in even snow, even though I had studded tires like I do on this car, without all-wheel drive, it is a little bit scary whether or not you're going to be able to maintain yourself on the road. But what's nice is that this has 4MATIC Plus, so this makes it a very good AMG on all different areas in the United States or the world. So if you are in California, you have all-wheel drive, but you can put it in drift mode so you can have rear-wheel drive. Or if you're in Pennsylvania like me, where it's going to be winter until March or April, you don't have to worry about your car giving out on the road if there's a huge snowstorm. Like in the C63s, if there's a huge snowstorm, I knew I wasn't going to be able to go out in it because it was too dangerous. But with this, having 4MATIC Plus and studded tires, you don't really have to worry about much. And that is part of the comfort, because you are comforted by the fact that you know that you can drive this car through anything and it really wouldn't be too much of a problem. So I figured the other thing that we could talk about this car is how much fun it is to drive. And that's what makes it a great daily driver, is that when you want to have something that you drive every single day, you want to make sure that you can enjoy it, basically have fun with it as much as you can every day you get in it, because you're in it so often, it would suck to not have a fun car. Well, it's safe to say that the CLA 45 AMG 2020 is a perfect, fun daily driver. Every time I get in this car, I actually get really excited to drive it because it's so much fun. The one thing that makes this car so much fun is, I think, because of how small it is. The small engine makes it a fast and nimble car around back roads, because I live in the countryside of Pennsylvania, so having a car that is a lot of fun on the country roads is very important to me, and this car ticks all the boxes. In terms of fun, this car is amazing because it's a smaller car, smaller engine, but it has a 4MATIC Plus to back it up. So when you're driving on these back roads, you don't really have to worry too much whether or not the rear is going to kick out, unless you do like to drift and you are really good at drifting. Then a rear wheel drive is going to be a lot better. But you can put this into race mode and then drift mode, so you can drift around corners on the country back roads whenever you want. But on most cases, if you're in Sport Plus, you get that 4MATIC Plus, so you don't really feel like you're going to fly off the road. I know when I was in my C63s driving on back roads, I was always worried that the rear was going to kick out, because when you put it in race mode, it has no traction at all. In this car, it still has that 4MATIC Plus traction unless you turn it off yourself. So it's really nice to have that backup when you're driving on those country roads and driving as fast as you want in race mode, and you don't have to worry about the rear kicking out like in the C63s, because it's a rear-wheel drive car. 0 to 60, so 0 to 60 in this car, I've had one of my friends actually DM me on Instagram, and he told me that he got around 3.7 to 3.8 in this car, which is insane. For a car with a small engine and not as much horsepower as the C63s, this car beats the 0 to 60 by like 0.2, 0.3 seconds in most cases. And I think that's amazing, and obviously that has to do with the 4MATIC Plus being able to put all the power down without having to worry about the rear kicking out and, you know, flying all over the place or sliding off the road. And that's what makes this car the perfect daily driver. I'll put it in Sport Plus, give it a little bit of a launch, so here we go. Not too much though. I mean, like what? This car is so quick. That was in Sport Plus mode, but like, I mean, that tells you it's so quick. I love it. I just love it. And then you go in, put in a comfort mode. It's as if you weren't even flying on the back roads. So the cops can't even get mad because they won't even know that you were driving so fast. And that's why I'm saying that this is the perfect daily driver, because you get the comfort of a daily driver, but you get the performance of an AMG combined into one. And it doesn't cost as much as other AMGs or other performance cars. It's just like, it's the perfect package. And that's why I'm saying this is the perfect daily AMG. So that completes it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. That's pretty much why this makes the CLA 45 AMG 2020 the perfect daily AMG. I know other AMGs like the GT63, E63, CLS 63 all have the big V8s, also all-wheel drive, and have a better interior than this car, much more comfortable, and I highly agree with you 100% on that. But in terms of maintenance and cost, this is a lot cheaper, so it is a lot easier to own this car rather than the big boy AMGs. But like I said, if you have the money, the other AMGs are perfect dailies as well. But in terms of a good daily driver for people who aren't, you know, as big baller as that, like me, this car is as good as it gets as a perfect daily AMG. Thank you again for watching. I'm going to be trying to upload Monday, Wednesday, Friday, so don't hold me accountable for that, because I never know if I'm going to be able to upload that many videos a week, but I'm going to try. But I'll see you guys on the next video.